All right, now everybody knows these logos. Sunbow, Marvel Productions, and when we talk about the G1 cartoon, we call it the Sunbow show. That's what we talk about, right? We refer to it as Sunbow, and that kind of misrepresents how the show was made. People use Sunbow as a descriptor for it, but really Marvel Productions made most of the show. The deal with Sunbow is, it was a company, it was quite a new company. It was established by the Griffin McCall advertising agency to make animation for their clients, and Hasbro was one of their clients. So it was through Griffin McCall that Sunbow produced the cartoon for Hasbro. But because Marvel had also produced all the developmental work for Transformers, the character bios, the names, things like that, Marvel Productions, which is Marvel's animation arm, they co-produced it together. But it was largely all done at Marvel Productions. Jim Shooter, the editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics at the time, famously once said that all Sunbow did was remove Marvel Productions cover sheets from the scripts and staple their own on. But the thing about it is, well, Marvel Productions, the story editors of the show, Dick Robbins and Bryce Malik, they worked at Marvel Productions, and the dialogue editor, Ron Friedman, was a Marvel Productions staff member. But come season 3, Sunbow actually took over production directly, and the new story editors who came on there, the famous Flynn Dilley, Marv Wolfman, Steve Gerber, Buzz Dixon, these guys were Sunbow staff, and they took over the production of the show with season 3, which is why season 3 is so different from seasons 1 and 2, not just because everything jumps forward, but the whole tone and look of the show, and it's why ACOM comes in so much more then. But the way, so Marvel Productions was generally responsible for making episodes prior to season 3, and we are looking at a season 1 episode. And an episode would essentially always start with Hasbro. It was a grueling process, because how it usually worked would be Hasbro would simply send a list to Marvel Productions and Sunbow and say, we want these toys advertised in this episode. That's where everything began. It was just a list of, 1 to 13, these guys, these guys, these guys, and these guys. This is what we want, this is what they had to do. And it's why season 1, after you get about 3 episodes into season 1, suddenly it's all about Dinobots, Jetfire, and then Insecticons and Constructicons at the very end, because they had to start advertising the next year's toys, because season 1 aired in late 1984, but they were already into the business of promoting the first round of the next year's toys, which is why the 1984 guys really got to do anything in the cartoon, because they were already being pushed out the door to be replaced with the new product. I'm not going to dwell on that Bob Budiansky would create the characters' personalities, and we all know how that worked, so I'm not going to dwell on it. But you would usually then wind up with something like this. Now, this is the original briefing binder page, which is the profile for Scrapper. And you can see before, they didn't even have artwork created for the characters at this early stage, because this was done in July of 1984. So, the cartoon hadn't even started airing yet, not even More Than Meets the Eye had aired, and they were already pushing 1985 product. They had to use photographs of Diaclone toys, because you can see how it's stressed. Black and white, Xeroxed photographs of Diaclone toys were how they showed what the characters would visually be at this early stage. Not correct color, because I forget what color Scrapper was in Diaclone. Anybody know? Orange, was it? Orange. Orange, there we go, thank you. But you can see the bio here. This is the cut-down version. Bob Budiansky would write a full-length bio, and then it would be cut down to fit on the tech specs. And this is the cut-down version. And it's exactly what would be on his tech specs, except for, can you see my laser pointer? Yeah. You can see it's got the can fly at 60 miles an hour by the addition of a levitation wing, which was never in the cartoon or comics, obviously, but it referred to the Devastator chest plate, which came with the toy that you could attach to the back of the vehicle mode. But it was never in the show or anything like that. And you can see up at the top here that sure, press the right button. That his original name of Gravedigger has been crossed out and replaced with Scrapper by hand. In fact, the entirety of Heavy Metal War, as we go on and see here, was written with Scrapper named Gravedigger and Scavenger called Scrounge, which were their pre-production names. And they weren't changed until at some time after the 26th of July. I don't think we really know when. I'm not sure what the difference between a tractor shovel and a hay loader is, but somebody felt the need to write that one over. I forget what's next. There, well, so while Budiansky would be writing the profiles, he would just be going off of the toys and things. And then over at Marvel Productions, character models were being created by a team of designers that was led by Floro Deary. In season 1, I think there were only like 3 designers. It expanded a lot in season 2 because there were so many more characters. And a lot of the characters don't look like their toys in season 1, as we all know. Some of them were based on earlier artwork by a Japanese artist, Shohei Kohara, which was created for the original Transformers animated commercial. And then Deary smoothed them over, made their heads a little bigger, removed wheels, things like that. A lot of the other season 1984 characters were created using the box art as a basis. But when it came to the new 1985 product, they were clearly, as you can see from this side by side, they were clearly using the toys as the basis for how the models were being drawn. And most of the Constructicons actually had early versions, early revisions, where they all had individual eyes. I think I want to say Scavenger and Mixmaster were the only 2 who didn't, and everyone else did. But they were replaced with visors for the finished look. I mean, you could go either way there, really, couldn't you, based on the toy? But keep an eye on that, because we'll come back to that later when we're watching the episode. You'll see that sneaks in there, and that's just the way these things tended to work. So while the models were being designed, this was all happening separately. I mean, everything was so spread out. And we hear today in animation, like if any of you are animators yourselves, or if you follow people who work in cartoons and social media, because a lot of that information is more out there now. Lost the train of thought. They talk about writers' rooms and how everyone's on the same page and there's a lot of collaboration. Well, the way cartoons were made back in the 80s was it was all freelance writers spread out everywhere who had no contact with each other and had to rely on the story editors and script editors to make everything matchy-matchy. And so, like, you have famous instances where David Wallace wrote The Secret of Omega Supreme without Omega's trademark speech pattern, because he didn't know he had a trademark speech pattern, because it was being written at the same time as a billion other episodes starring Omega Supreme, and it was up to someone to go in and fix the dialogue. But Omega Supreme was, well, we all know how that episode turned out. They had to put in an explanation for why Omega could suddenly talk normally, so they didn't have to literally rewrite the entire script. And this is what a script page would look like. Transformer scripts ran, I have this written down here because it's escaped me. Transformer scripts, today a script would usually go to 30 or 35 pages. But a script back in the 80s was about 50 pages long, because, as you can see from all of this, I don't know, is this readable? Can anybody read this? Yeah, good, okay. Well, you can see how this is all, there's not a lot of dialogue here, because it was the writer's job to do what they called directing on paper. You can see how they had to describe the angles and the wide shots and how the camera would move. It was their job to choreograph the entire episode as well as just write it. And this is the script for the fight between the Constructicons and Devastator, with Devastator's name just consistently misspelled all the way through. And you can see up here how Scrapper is Gravedigger. Now, the way a script would come into being was it went through a 3-step process, where a writer was contracted to provide 3 what they called premises, which was a short 1-paragraph, 1-page idea for what the episode would be about. A very basic episode. Grimlock gets superpowers, or Ironhide shrinks, or a cartoon stock plot. And that would be sent off, and if any of the premises were approved, they were then contracted to expand them out to what were called outlines, which is a couple of page long document that would describe all the major beats of the episode, how it broke down into individual acts, where the action would go, what your cliffhangers were, and then after that, they were contracted to expand it out to a full-length script like this, which, as I said, ran to about 50 pages. And then once they had turned their scripts in, oh, well, no, I tell you what, how much do you reckon a writer got paid for all this back then?
£5 an hour?
£10 per hour. It wasn't per hour, it was a flat fee for scripts. 300. It was $3,500 per script, which is about $8,000 today. So there you go. I don't know if that's what they pay writers anymore. We don't have any animation writers here to tell us, but that's what it was back then. Now, this gentleman is the man who would come in after the scripts were turned in, because, like I said, it was someone's job to make sure everything matched. to put in all the character speech quirks and correct any continuity errors. And you'd think that was the job of the story editor. I don't know exactly what the story editors did in this show, because this man is Ron Friedman, whose name you probably know because he wrote the original screenplay for the Transformers the movie. He didn't write any other episodes of the G1 cartoon, but he did write all the G.I. Joe miniseries and a bunch of other things too. But his fingerprints are all over the Generation 1 cartoon, because when a script would come in, this is what he did to it. He was credited for additional dialogue. And it was his, and you can see here, he was not shy. But it was his job to make, as I say, speech quirks. But, I mean, we all know, the G1 cartoon, it has a voice. I mean, we know that continuity is not the greatest in the G1 cartoon, but it did have a unique, quirky voice. Every time that, a roboto-possum or a photovoltaic pussycat or a guinea pigatron gets mentioned, or someone talks about a nickel-knuckle sandwich, or their selenium shin guards, or weird insults like metallic mini meatball or tinfoil turkey and all that, all Ron Friedman. That was what he did. He is the man responsible for the language of the Generation 1 cartoon. He would add all of that in. Now, there isn't actually any of that in Heavy Metal War, so I can't give you any particular, nothing serious. I can't give any particular examples, but you can see how, if you know your Heavy Metal War, which I'm assuming you all do, that pretty much everything he wrote went into the episode. It doesn't seem like anybody really argued with him. You can see, I mean, like over here we actually have some deleted dialogue where Megatron argues his way into Optimus letting him speak before he arrives, and it flows a little better than the actual finished episode, where I guess they had to edit it out for time. But otherwise, the dialogue that's here that made it into the episode is the dialogue you hear in the episode. Ron Friedman really was responsible for the whole voice of the cartoon. And when he was done, well, while this was all going on, because he couldn't wait till it was over until the new assets that you needed designed for the cartoon could be designed, because you had the character models going on at the same time as the bios were being created. And the writers would typically have the bios to create the scripts using, because obviously you needed to know who the character was to be able to write about them. But they didn't always have the character models at the time they were writing it, because I mean there's a bit in the script where the Constructicons arrive for the first time, and the script goes out of its way to describe Scrapper's wing and Long Haul's missile launcher and all these features that are in their bios that aren't part of their character models, that were never in the show. Working off the outline and knowing what kind of scenery and special props and things would be required, the designers would get to work creating the incidental models for the episode. So here we can see the model for the exchange furnace, the rectifier machine that Megatron uses to take the other Decepticons' powers. And this one's the model for the construction site that appears at the very start. And you can see how very faithful the background models were, very literally they interpreted it, right down to the table with the plans on it and the little, any quantity surveyors in the house, what's the name of that thing?
Theodolite?
And the box of plans and everything. But they weren't, things ran parallel. Now the thing about Heavy Metal War that is the reason it is the subject of this panel is, Heavy Metal War is the only G1 episode for which the complete storyboards are out in the wild. This is the storyboard team, circa 1986, but you know, it's the only picture we have. These are the guys, you'll probably recognize some of these names, probably not many, but Romeo Tangal inked George Perez on New Teen Titans, hot fact for you. And it was these guys' job to take the finished script, and I do mean the finished script using Friedman's dialogue revisions, and map out the episode in accordance with all the cinematic staging and everything that was included in it. And here's what a storyboard page looked like. And you can see, again, how faithful a recreation of that incidental model the storyboards would use. And this is just the very first stage of the scene of the episode, obviously. But while some incidental models would be completed, like the construction site, for instance, you can see from this next one that they weren't all, because here's the foreman, and we all know this episode, so we know that foreman was clean-shaven in that episode. But here's some generic foreman that the storyboard artist has drawn in because there was no model created for it yet. That's the pace these things were produced on. They just did what they could when they could. And so this would be sent off once the storyboard was done, and I'm not going to dwell on the business of voice recording because we have Hal Real here today, so he'll be able to talk about that in his panels this weekend. So you don't need me to tell you about that. I'm sure you all have a pretty good idea of how voice recording for it worked. And then the voice recording would be edited to match up with the storyboards, and it would all be sent off to be animated. And let's see what my next one is here. Okay, right, well, here we go. So, using the storyboards and the completed animation of the episode, we put together a little animatic for you to show how the storyboards would guide the animators into creating the finished episode. So, let us have a watch of that. And this is the Dinobots versus the Constructicons, because, you know, I figured what better thing to use for this sequence. So you can see how the individual scenes match up to the sketches.
Destroy Teletran 1! Dinobots destroy you!
Sludge not see these Decepticons before.
Not see again either, because we dynamite them to pieces! Dinobots! No! Fool around! Right! Dinobots! Transform! It's bad news, Scrapper. They've brought out the heavy artillery.
Then it's time we did the same, only heavier. Constructicons, transform! Phase 1! Now, transform! Phase 2!
Prepare to meet your doom. Nothing can withstand the might of Devastator.
And that's how that works. Pretty neat, right? I think they turned my mic off during that, so I couldn't point out how the like TU stands for, I don't know how it stands for, but it means truck in, which is designating the camera move in and out. And you can see how they described how the background would move and such. So once that was happened, and once the animatic was turned into a finished episode, well, we all know Generation 1 had its fair share of animation errors. But what you might not believe is they tried to fix them. They did. They didn't just put them out like that and they shrugged their shoulders and let them go. The way Flint Dilley tells it is, if you think of it like an automotive assembly line, a car comes out, maybe it's missing its steering wheel, they say, well, we can fix that. And one comes out, it's maybe missing its windows, and we can fix that. And one comes out and it's missing its engine, and it's like, we don't have time to fix that. And it would mount up, so they would get, but because season 1, and it gets worse in season 2, obviously, and season 3, but because season 1 was only 13 episodes, they did have time to send the animation back for fixes. And how many of you are familiar, pardon me, how many of you are familiar with the problems with the original DVD releases of the episodes? Only a few. Now, if you've only ever seen this episode on DVD, you might not be aware of what you're seeing, because the broadcast masters, the finished episodes, were quite badly degraded when the time came for the DVDs to be created in the early 2000s. Some of you are probably still single-digit ages in the early 2000s. So Rhino, the American company that did the DVDs for the very first time, went back to the production masters because they were of a higher quality, more easily remasterable. But what they didn't realize was those were the unfinished animation that got sent back to be corrected. So the DVD releases, and the only DVD releases we've had here in the UK, are the ones that use Rhino's remastered, incorrect versions of the episodes. Now, Shout Factory, the current company that owns the the license has gone back and fixed as much as they can. But here in the UK, we've never had that version released. So what's coming up next here is a comparison video that's going to show you how the animation was when the studio originally delivered it and called it done. And then that's on the left here. And you'll see the picture quality on the left looks better because it's from Rhino's DVD source, so it's been remastered. Whereas the one on the right here is the unremastered but completed finished animation with the corrections that were added in after they sent it back. So I'll explain a few of these as we go along, because there are a couple of different examples. So if we leave my mic on for this one, unless I'm overridden or anything like that.
We have what we came for!
You can see that the background doesn't scroll with the Constructicons. And the camera doesn't rise with the Constructicons, so you don't see their faces. This is a really weird one. Moonhole goes a little off model when he straightens up here. Just there. So they sped up the pan to hide him, but it puts the names on the thing, so even the finished version is not so great. And then they just plain didn't do this. This whole thing is missing from the Rhino DVD version. And as if that wasn't bad enough, when we get to the end... So they did fix those things sometimes. Self-explanatory. Now here's one. This is staged a little different, but the luminous paint effects are all missing from the rectifier chips in the furnace. So it's all flat, you can see in the animation when they come and add their chips. And so you never see the chip at all.
You and the others have your orders.
Incorrect background, see? Outdoor sky background while they're in the underground base. No floor. That's in the episode, that's not an artifact of this video.
The robots are assembled to watch my combat with Optimus Prime.
And
my
what else would you like?
Constructicons will tunnel their way beneath those headquarters.
Now here's an example of how things are just timed differently for some reason. We don't really see Autobot headquarters as the Autobots come out. The timing don't match up at all. They're just going to sit there for a just long enough to be uncomfortable. And then I now transforms backwards. This one explains itself. We know this scene. And again! This one's just a still image. You see, Huffer is supposed to be pulling the trailer, but they drew and colored Prime. But rather than redraw it, they just colored Prime orange, because it's only on screen for a second, which is why we're using a still. So they, rather than redraw it, that's just what they did. They just colored Prime in orange. Strong flash. Here's this scene again. Pay close attention to the laser blasts. See the gaps in the animation? They're coming out here. This things just weren't done. The foreground element is just missing, and you can see the laser blasts overlap instead of. Maybe you see this. No Autobots, just not there. Just not there. Again. It's not there. Just full missing animation. And then the rest of it doesn't sync up with the timing until you. I think this last one is just for the pure arbitrary nature of what these things could be like. Maybe just do that one. Just move it so it's not going into his eye anymore. You know what? You know, it's nasty. It's okay over here. It's fine. That's how arbitrary it could be. You know, some of it was about fixing errors, and some of it was just, that's nasty looking. Change that. And that's it. So if you've only seen the one on the left, that's what you're missing. Now I think the next thing we have here, I just want to check myself. Oh, okay. So the next thing we have is the full episode, which we will watch now. But before I do that, so we saw that the Constructicons bios were written in July. And that kind of gives the game away a little, because, again, as I said, if you're in animation, you follow animators on Tumblr, people who work in cartoons, they talk about how long it takes before the work they've done reaches audiences. It can be 18 months to 3 years. How long do you suppose it took this?
2 weeks?
That's a little harsh, 2 weeks. The process of creating a script took about a month and a half, but several of those weeks were waiting for the writers to get back to you. You had a week to do your premises, waited a week to hear back, a week to do your outlines, a week to hear back, and then 2 weeks to create your finished script. The finished Heavy Metal War script was delivered by writer Dawn Glut on July 27th, the day after that fax with Scrapper's bio went through. It was then revised by Ron Friedman and revised again and delivered on the 13th of August. Heavy Metal War aired on the 13th of August, this weekend, by the way. How's that for timing? Heavy Metal War aired on the 15th of December. 4 months to go from script to finished animation, not just finished and in the hands of the network waiting to go on television, on your telly, aired 4 months. So maybe you understand why the G1 cartoon didn't always look that great as a result of that. But the Mapeses are currently working on a book about visionaries. And they recently acquired a lot of pre-production material on visionaries. Storyboards, scripts, cassettes of the original studio recordings. And in amongst all the visionaries things, they got some tapes of original Transformers studio recordings. And they have been posting on YouTube and shared through Twitter. And it's been on, the old Spark 2005 boards. So it's your fault if you haven't heard about it. Deleted dialogue from Generation 1. Clean as day, as if you were hearing the actors right here now. Never heard before since 1984. And they've done the first 7 or 8 episodes of season 1. And they had Heavy Metal War. And I said to them, guys, hold fire on Heavy Metal War because we could do something special with that for TFNation. Because we have the storyboards. So who wants to see the very first Generation 1 deleted scenes anywhere in the world ever? Now, they're storyboard animatics, so we are taking black and white sketches like you saw before, but with brand new dialogue and reconstructed audio and music to match it with it. So our first one is an early scene in the episode. It's only a little one. But this is a scene of what happens after the Constructicons leave the construction site and return to the underground base.
We return to our master, Megatron!
Footage from the episode.
They're with the Decepticons!
Here we go. So here's our panning shot of the Constructicons flying past to reveal that it was near Autobot headquarters. Scavenger with some sonic beams emanating.
I have a reading, Scrapper. It must be the secret entrance. It's about time you did your job, Scavenger. Hook! Activate the entranceway!
With my usual finesse, Scrapper.
Hook points his fingers, which emit a crackling beam. Crackling beam zaps the disc on the landscape, and the disc closes. A section of ground opens up to reveal an entranceway. Constructicons enter, fly down. They go through the tunnel.
You see, Starscream, my Constructicons have returned to our temporary base right on schedule. They were worth the time we spent building them in these caverns.
That remains to be seen, almighty Megatron.
Scrapper, report!
All present are accounted for, noble leader!
So that's just a little one to start you off. Now, I asked before, did you ever wonder why the Autobots were standing outside their base whenever Megatron showed up? This is why.
You've got us curious, Wheeljack. What's your big surprise? And what does it have to do with the Dinobots?
Well, Optimus Prime, fellow Autobots, human friends Spike, Sparkplug, and Chip.
Oh, get on with it, Wheeljack. You take longer to say something than a mechano-mouth in slow motion with the glitch.
Yes. As you know, the Dinobots have always been, unpredictable. Kinda clumsy sometimes. But I've been reprogramming them, so just watch.
The boulder with waves emitted from the
impressed. Me too, Wheeljack.
Right. You did a good job with the big guys.
I'm also pleased, Wheeljack. Well done.
Thank you, Optimus Prime. I try to do my best. Okay. Dinobots, transform!
There's a little deleted line here. It's not because we'll do even better next time.
Now that the Dinobot beauty pageant's over, maybe we can... Huh? Those signals spell trouble, and I'm talking Decepticons.
Can you make out how many, Spike?
Looks like just one, Dad. One's one too many when it's Megatron.
I got the speed, so follow my lead. Okay, you're faster, Cliff Jumper, but I'm tougher. Bumblebee, take our friends out of danger.
You heard Optimus. Let's go!
That one is pretty neat. But for our third and final scene. Who wants to see the extended cut of Megatron and Optimus Prime's battle with extra powers?
Yeah.
So here we go. It kicks in. Now, actually, before I hit play on this one, so we're not literally watching the entire second act of the episode again. I have cut out some of the finished animation that you saw in the episode already. You won't see Skywarp's teleporting power or a few other bits and pieces. If you see anything missing that you know is in there, it's because I took it out to save us all some time. But there's, well, here we go.
According to my calculations, you shouldn't have much trouble, Optimus. Your strength is far greater than Megatron's.
Just stomp him good, Optimus. He's had it coming for a long, long time.
I will do my best not to fail you, the other Autobots, or the Earth.
I know you won't. You're no quitter.
Hey guys, I think we're here.
Autobots, transform! Okay, we're here. Where's the opposition?
That answer your question, Ironhide?
Without our power chip rectifiers, we're lucky we can still fly, Megatron.
I wouldn't want you walking to the show. That might tip our hand.
You will remember to return our chips once you've used them against Optimus Prime, won't you?
Strange. Some of those crumbs usually like to show off by changing to their jet plane modes.
No biggie, Ironhide. They probably don't want to take the spotlight away from Megatron.
I feel like Ratchet should be more suspicious. But remember that, because we have...
Hail Optimus Prime! And welcome to defeat!
Defeat Megatron? But our battle has not yet begun.
As soon as our respective armies take their places, we shall correct that oversight.
It's like hot outside with a bad rather than stadiums. Down sets on them and pulls out. Comes into...
One-to-one combat, Megatron.
With the vanquished and his army exiled to deep space forever.
My power chip gives him the use of my cluster bombs.
All right, Optimus! Serve him good! Give it to him!
Go, Optimus!
And the use of my null ray, too.
Did that before.
Never did that before, that's all.
doesn't print out right. How'd Megatron get so versatile?
Come on, Optimus! You can do it!
That's how the art part works in this version. We've got those networks teleporting, like I say, so we can all
Foolish move! I knew you were going to do that!
Megatron read Prime's thoughts, just like Soundwave.
You cannot blast what you cannot see! Know what you cannot hear! You were good, Optimus Prime, but not good enough to fight Megatron! And so the battle ends!